Hello and welcome back to the Perception Podcast, where we just see things a little bit differently. I'm Dan, your host, and today's episode has been a long time coming. I've finally shown my beautiful face, as you can probably hopefully see, and I've finally sorted my life out and actually organised an NHS professional to come on the podcast and talk about the pandemic and its impacts, and also what went on in the news a little while back. I'm sure you know what I'm alluding to. So I'd like to welcome Lucy to the podcast today, who I'll be introducing in a minute. And first, I just thought I'd let her give a little description about what she does on a daily basis at work.
Okay, I work in a local district general hospital with children and their families that have life-threatening and life-limiting conditions. I look after them in the hospital, in their home, and do a lot of liaison between different services in order to ensure that they get the care and treatment that they need.
So a very important job then, definitely. Well, I just wanted to say here, I think it's pretty obvious, but I think I speak for the whole country when I say how thankful I am for you and your colleagues' effort during the pandemic and what people like you continue to do on a daily basis, really.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if we just start off, I know I've already asked a question, but if we just start off by saying, what was the impact on the mental health of your patients and colleagues, or what did you really notice during the period?
It's been quite interesting for us. From a patient point of view, initially, our patients were absolutely terrified, and so were their families. And so were we. However, in view of everything coming through with PPE and hand washing and the simple hygiene needs that have been encouraged and necessitated by everybody, our families currently are more nervous about COVID coming to an end because they all have problems with their immune system. They're actually protected and have been healthier in the period of COVID than prior. So what I mean is they haven't had as many hospital admissions. However, we've not actually sat down. That's just the children that I manage and deal with. We've not sat down and done the national figures or any. I haven't got any statistics. From my colleagues' point of view, we're nearly all burnt out.
Understandably.
Yes. A lot of us got COVID at the beginning because we weren't provided with the appropriate PPE, and there was a delay in getting that to us. And a lot of us have got long-term effects as a result of it, this so-called long COVID. And so it continues. So I think we're feeling a bit angry with it all, really.
But understandably, really, I would be absolutely fuming. But then to kind of counter that, I also wanted to say, how did the kind of unprecedented public support help you to get through the difficult time? Because I think nobody really saw that coming.
No, the public support has been fantastic and still continues to be fantastic. Unfortunately, it's taken its toll on us all. And as I say, the public support has been great. But it doesn't get us away with the fact that over 150,000 people have lost their lives due to this, and that could have been prevented, I believe, personally, as do a large number of my colleagues, if it was handled differently. But, you know, we are where we are. But the public support has been great. I don't think enough has been made, though, of how many colleagues we've lost. No. Just within my trust, we went through a period of about 2 months where we lost at least one colleague per week.
That is mental. I don't think I could deal with that, just seeing that on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And I think the point's kind of evident from what you previously said, but do you think that NHS workers should have been protected more from the virus?
Absolutely. Yes. And I think, you know, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I appreciate that there are things that happened that were unforeseen and could not be predicted. But the number of times what we could or should wear changed. So getting it right and keeping us safe would have been compromised at times. And that's through no one's fault as such. It's just the nature of the beast, as it were.
Definitely. I know myself, and obviously it's not the same situation at all, but even at school, the amount of times that the advice kind of changed. So such an important thing is like the frontliners, they always say, like, it's just like, how do you even get that right? Do you know what I mean? It's such an important
It's
decision.
crazy. Yeah. And also it was so, the information being given out was so open to interpretation.
Yeah.
And it still is.
That's probably for you.
It still is.
Yeah.
But, you know.
Then I kind of wanted to move on just more generally, like how integral do you think an institution like the NHS is to the country moving forward and generally has been?
Me personally, I 100% support the NHS. And from that point of view, I just believe that everybody should have access to healthcare free of charge as and when they need it. And I'd hate to think that people didn't go and seek help when things could be easily fixed because of money. I wholeheartedly support it. I do disagree with some things that you can get done on the NHS, but very few, to be honest, very few.
Yeah.
And I think
you can keep going if you want. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I just think it's absolutely vital to ensure that we get a fair society, and everybody gets what they need. However, I think there needs to be a bigger look at companies that charge the NHS extortionate fees for their services and their products.
I haven't really done much research on that side of it, so I have to look into that a bit more, but definitely take your word for it on that side of it. But I know the NHS, even to me, with my mental health and my legs, has just been so important. I know that I'd be in a completely different place if we had to pay for things because we just don't have the money to do stuff like that. So yeah, it's so important to me, especially, and to you, obviously, as well. Yeah. And all these kind of questions just kind of link on from each other. But do you think communication was good enough, both from the government and like from your superiors, like close to where you were?
From the government, no, I don't think it was clear enough. I think it was too, as I said earlier, open to interpretation, because I read it and understand it. Like to think I'm a fairly intelligent person, as are my colleagues, and we go in and get completely opposite viewpoints on what we should and shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
In view of being kept informed of what was going on within our trust, I believe that our trust was very, very good at keeping us informed. We had daily bulletins, and at one point, I think they even went twice daily bulletins, updating us on what was going on. However, it was hard reading because it included the percentages of people within the hospital with COVID-19 and the percentages of people that had died. I think, but the information giving to us was very good from the trust.
In a way, even though it's hard reading, it's good to, in some way, it sounds a bit wrong, but keep the memory of those that have been lost in some way, whether that be a bulletin or whatever. Keep it alive because it's just a horrible situation at the end of the day.
I think it did help us a bit when we were getting those updates. Is that when you went round to the canteen or to the coffee shop to get a drink whilst you're at work, the number of funeral directors queuing up to collect people who had passed was quite hard hitting.
That's crazy. Again, it just stresses how much you did above and beyond like your contract. Do you know what I mean? I don't think enough like emphasis, although like there's been support in that, I don't think enough emphasis has been put on like the ins and outs of what you guys had to go through.
Absolutely not.
No. But I don't control the media or the government, so
no, absolutely
live with that sort of it.
But also, you've got to think of it the other way: is that if you gave too much of that information out, then you could scaremonger people and make the situation worse.
Yeah, which the media do a lot anyway. So maybe
Exactly.
that's the best thing. And then another really important thing in such time as a pandemic or anything like that, I always wanted to talk about, like, you personally, how did you deal with the work life balance of things and trying to get that sorted out?
Me personally, was quite challenging in one way, but
Mhm.
it was much same as normal in many others. In that I was still going to work and doing my normal daily routine
Mhm.
as I was prior to COVID and since, because my working didn't decrease. If anything, it increased. And I think the home work balance is that if because I have got the long COVID and the chronic fatigue stuff, if I didn't have that, I think I would personally have found it difficult.
Mhm.
But I'm so tired when I get home from work, I just literally go straight to bed.
Yeah.
So for me, that bit was okay. It has been incredibly hard not seeing the family.
Yeah.
And one of my brothers in particular is in France, and not knowing when we're going to be able to see them. And it'll be 2 years in October since we last saw them. And I'm used to seeing them every 3 months. So
Mm.
it's, challenging from that point of view. And not being able to hug the kids and see people in person is difficult. But I've had work to keep me busy.
Yeah.
If I hadn't had work to keep me busy, I don't quite know how I would have got through it, to be
I think a
honest.
lot of people feel the same way as well.
Mm,
Whatever they've done, teacher or whatever. I know my mum has said quite similar things as well, even though it's different situations.
mm,
And I think quite apt to that really is the situation in the media, as we were talking about earlier, has often been compared to like a battlefield, like a war kind of situation. Did it feel like that firsthand? Like, did it feel as like, I don't want to say as dramatic, but you know what I mean, as people were making out in the media?
yeah, it was very, very scary because it kept changing so often.
Yeah.
Uh, we deal with infectious diseases day in, day out, but this was different because of the numbers involved and the severity. And then also the fact that I think the anxiety around it and the limiting of human touch. As
Yeah.
a nurse, I'm used to, if a parent I'm working with bursts into tears, I would give them a hug. I can't do that and still can't do that. And that's a big part of my role and my colleagues' role. So
Yeah.
comforting people when they've just been given bad news about their child has been really difficult, and we can't do that.
If
Um,
anything, that's probably the most important bit as well, to like kind of, I would say
yeah,
reconcile, but I can't find the right word with the family and stuff like that.
yeah. And also, when we've had families who've had to go over and the child's been diagnosed with a cancer, and only one parent can be there, the other parent couldn't be there,
That's just
and
awful.
or being on a video link, and that is really, really challenging.
Heart-wrenching. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, and I think this is a perfect question as well. Is this sort of situation to kind of like really make a difference? Is this why you initially decided to join the NHS and stuff like that? Or
You
obviously,
know, I don't know why I joined the NHS. I mean, obviously, as a nurse,
Mhm.
you want to you do it to make a difference. I do it because I enjoy my job. And I do it because I care. The day
Yeah,
I stop caring is the day I believe I won't be able to do my job as well as I do it now. So the day I don't care is the day I need to stop.
yeah,
I personally think everybody has to be treated equally. So therefore, if I worked in the private sector,
hmm,
that wouldn't be the case.
yeah.
Uh, so it's a difficult one, really. But I suspect that's probably why, and that's the way I've been brought up to believe that.
Yeah. I think in the private sector, it can feel a bit more transactional at times, where I think you especially kind of work best when you get that personal relationship with people.
Yes, yes. And I know a friend of mine is currently working in the private sector, and it's far from what she thought It was. She does 50% of the time in the NHS, 50% in the private sector because of the nature of her job. And she's bored because she has to wait until she's summoned, as it were, by the patients for help.
Couldn't imagine that. You touched on a bit of anxiety earlier on, and obviously, as listeners will know, I suffer a bit from that as well. So I also wanted to ask, do you think mental health is made enough of a priority within the kind of NHS structure at the minute?
Absolutely not. And I think that there's a lot of things that need to be done, specifically with children and young adults and mental health. There has, again, I haven't got the statistics, but the number of young people that we've been seeing in the acute setting who have had significant mental health difficulties over this pandemic, and probably before, but the numbers have increased since, is phenomenal. So you could potentially go into a shift and 80% of your patients have mental health needs. And that's not that unusual currently. But then I don't think the support, everyone's just assumed that children and young people just get on with it. And I don't think enough credit has been given to them or to the teachers about getting the kids through this. Simple thing, online learning, it's great that they're still learning, but actually you've got to have the finance to have the computers, etc. at home, and the Wi-Fi, and it be fast enough and enough if you've got more than one child. As well as the skills. I think we're going to have a generation of kids that can't write because they haven't been. And social skills as well is, simple things. Like I saw one of my nephews a couple of weeks ago in the garden, and he is 15 months, but he hasn't got the normal social skills you'd expect at 15 months because he hasn't seen people because he hasn't been able to.
Obviously. I think it's going to have more of an effect than people realise. I know myself, obviously, having a physical disability, I've always felt like the NHS are much more comfortable with dealing with the physical disabilities, and it's much more of an established thing. And obviously in the world anyway, we're getting more accustomed to dealing with mental health, and I think it's definitely going through a transitionary period at this present time. But I think a lot more work still needs to be done to get to that final end goal, where mental health is just as important, but if not a little bit more maybe than your physical health. Definitely. And then you also kind of touched on this before, but my last kind of question in this kind of conversation bit was, how did you deal with being real with your patients about what was going on during the pandemic, knowing that they can be so young and stuff like that?
Well, I think because the sort of patients that I work with, I'm used to being very honest. You know me, Dan, I'd say it as it is. Definitely. And if they ask me, then I'll tell them the same. And it is about, and I think sometimes, especially with children and adults, the fear of the unknown is worse than the reality. So if you're honest with them and saying, well, this simple things, say for instance, a blood test. Stay still, this is going to hurt, but it'll be over really quickly. Then you're telling them the truth, or give them a medicine that tastes horrible. And it's it's much bigger than that, but it's that sort of simplicity of, this is the case, this is what's happening, this is what we've got to do, and this is why we've got to do it. And I think, I'm lucky in that the group of families that I work directly with are all very receptive to that. And honesty, I always think, is the best policy.
I'll completely agree with that sentiment, because I know that a lot of my anxiety and low mood, as they like to call it, comes from the fear of the unknown that you were talking about. So I definitely get that, definitely. And then if we were going to move on into the bit of what I like to call the debate part of it, how did you, and do you still feel about the situation with the wage rises with the NHS and the government? I was just trying to work out my word in there. But the whole wage rise situation in the news.
No, none of us, and I know I do speak for my colleagues. for this is that none of us went into the job to get paid a huge sum of money. However, it feels even more insulting to be offered 1% now. A year ago, you had everybody saying how wonderful you were and out clapping every once a week and all the rest of it. And yet this time it's like, let's thank them, let's give them 1%, which actually, if you look at the rate of inflation, I can't remember the figures, but I've actually lost money by doing my job over the last few years, if you put it against the rate of inflation. And it's a little bit, I hate to say it, but it's the first time in my career, and I have now been nursing for 28 years, that I actually want to go on strike.
Definitely, I would back you all the way with that. I'd be fuming.
Yeah.
I've just put here in my notes. I feel like it's, instead of rewarded the people that genuinely deserve it for making a difference, it just feels like they're patting themselves on the back a bit for like the poor job that they did throughout the pandemic. It was like I don't really get that.
It's a kick in the teeth for us all, really.
I completely understand it. I think I'm completely the opposite. I think that this has been more like a war effort than we've seen domestically for a while. So I think like you should be given like medals for your bloody work.
Funny you should say that, because we are going to be given a certificate and a medal for going through the pandemic.
Brilliant.
Now, when that got announced that we were told that was going to happen, the whole office was absolutely insulted beyond belief.
Right.
Because I'd much rather that money being spent on that, one, goes to equipment that we need,
definitely,
or towards an extra nurse for the trust or the organisation. Because by the time,
that's how ignorant I am.
And it's just like, nah. And one of my colleagues has just recently moved from a different trust, and they've tried to do the same thing, and the same uproar was there. So I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. We have threatened to send them all back individually to the chief executive.
Good that you've at least got a voice in that sort of thing. You didn't have previously, which is good. I think the whole situation has been handled very poorly, but I won't say any more on that kind of side on things. But I think in general that's been a really interesting and productive discussion. It's been great having you on, Lucy, and I definitely want to get more people like you involved in the future, who can give really like a first-hand insight into stuff that I'm just not as knowledgeable about. Remember, as always, to listeners to stream download on all podcast streaming services, and if you're listening on YouTube, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. But apart from that, I think we're all done. Finally, it's all out of the way now. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Lucy?
No, thank you for inviting me to do this, Dan. And I'd like to just say that how proud I am of you doing this.
Thanks. I mean, it really does mean a lot. And you guys will hopefully hear from me again very, very soon. Bye.